Hi, my name is Charlie Sheppard, and I'm writing a book called Get Off the Fence. It's going to be published in 2024, and this presentation is a bit of an overview of what's in that book. Basically, this is all about ecocide education and how you can become more informed about what's happening in our world, in our shared ecosystem. Now, one of the ways to approach this is to actually imagine something. Would you fly on a plane with all of your family if there was a 1 in 10 chance the plane would crash? The answer to that is no, right? Nobody would take those odds. And would you take your family up to the space station if there was a 1 in 10 chance that the International Space Station would fail? And again, there's no way that you would do that, right? The risks are just way too high. Now, if you were already on the space station with all of your family, with all of your friends, and somebody was actively sabotaging your ecosystem, would you try and stop them? And of course you would. The facts are we can't survive in space in an International Space Station without a lot of supply from Earth. We just don't have the technology yet to live anywhere else other than where we are. And the fact is, we're on this amazing, beautiful spaceship, and we're traveling right now, all of us. So just imagine, if you're watching this video, that you are traveling right now at 514,000 miles an hour, same as me. And we're on this amazing spaceship. And what we have to do is we have to appreciate the fact that we can breathe the air, right? There's this exchange of gases that keeps us actually alive. Right? We can walk the land because there's gravity. We can sail the oceans. Fresh water is delivered to us from the sky, right? Solar energy is converted into food that we can eat. And in essence, what should we do if there's a 10% chance of damaging our one and only spaceship? Think about that. What should we do if there are people who are actually out there sabotaging right now our one shared ecosystem? The facts are that the ecology of Earth is an interlocking system, and we have to understand the system, right? The Ecocide Index looks at the interlocking data of human-induced ecological modification, right? So in 1960, we had a measurable rise of CO2. In 1990, one generation later, we had clear evidence of global warming. And in 2020, one generation after the announcement of global warming, we have the statistical probability of ecocide happening within 2 future generations. That would be my grandchildren. In 2050, regional ecocide will affect various geographic areas of the planet. And by 2080, just 2 future generations, we'll have statistical projections that show the possibility of global ecocide, which is the collapse of the systems that support life, including human life. Children born today may inherit a future without a future. I mean, this really is their future. And they, by the way, talk to any kid, they will know it, right? So humans over the last 120 years, right? This is the classic hockey stick that's always talked about, but humans put more tons of CO2 in the atmosphere every year, and it's not going away. It's getting more. So 2,400 gigatons of CO2 have been emitted by human activity, right? Gregory Bateson, who's one of the founders of systems thinking, talked about the major problems in the world are the result of the difference between how nature works and the way people think. Embracing systems thinking is our roadmap through the climate crisis. It reveals in every action in nature is connected and not a singular event. So these are the interlocking systems that accelerate planetary ecocide. We have the human input, and that increases the air cycle, which increases the fire cycle, which increases the water cycle, which increases the ice cycle. And these are all interlocking. There are nested loops which produce damaging impacts on society as a whole, including various forms of ecocide. So let's take a look at each one of these, and this is the air cycle. right? The most CO2 expelled to date in our history happened in 2020. Now look, the data already in this presentation is out of date, yet every year we set a new record, and we're continuing to set new records, right? If we want to avoid global ecocide, the highest priority must be to reduce CO2 pollution to zero as soon as possible. The present concentration of CO2 is at the highest level in the last 420,000 years, right? This is the time that we can measure through ice core measurements. But it's likely, the projections are the highest in the past 20 million years. So as we take a look at this further, as CO2 passes the 400 parts per million, the risk is what goes up may never come down. With no changes, we reach 550 parts per million by 2050 and 700 parts per million by 2080. In 2 generations, this level of CO2 creates significant cognitive decline. We know it. I mean, the people who commit suicide go into a garage and breathe carbon dioxide until they asphyxiate, right? We're adding that level, not all the way to that level, but we are actually have the projections where when we need our intelligence the most, we'll be suffering from cognitive decline by going just outside. So this is a fact. 5 of the warmest years on record have happened since 2010. The increases in temperature predicted for the future will make parts of the Earth uninhabitable. In some locations, temperatures predicted for 2050 are happening right now. Things are coming earlier and faster. So the number of heat waves that occur every year are going up. These extreme heat events increase the risk of other types of disasters, including drought and wildfire conditions. So the climate crisis really exemplifies how atmospheric warming impacts not just the air, but it sets off a chain reaction through ecosystems, economies, and communities, right? As the planet continues to warm, multi-day heat waves will increase in frequency, length, and intensity. Heat waves are not isolated events, but outcomes of interlocking systems. They're going to get worse before they get better. And what do we get with greater amounts of heat as we get larger, bigger, bolder, harder to put out fires, right? The hot, dry air literally sucks the moisture out of the ground and out of vegetation. The future of fires will only be worse, right? The Forest Service estimates more than 100 million trees died in the Northern Sierra Dixie Fire alone, right? The fact is, California has 149 million dead trees ready to ignite like a matchbook, right? So let's take a look at what the impact of that is. Trees help remove carbon from the atmosphere. Fewer trees reduce our ability to remove carbon. Each tree lost is a missed opportunity for carbon capture, a vital process in the fight against the climate crisis. Deforestation accounts for about 10% of worldwide emissions, a testament to its impact. So again, there's even a greater impact, right? When trees burn, they release carbon back into the atmosphere. This creates a vicious cycle, right? New data on forest fires confirm what we've long feared. Forest fires are becoming more widespread, burning nearly twice as much tree cover today as they did just 20 years ago. Start projecting this out into the future, folks, right? And the University of California has found that the 2020 wildfires in the state put twice as much greenhouse gas emissions into the Earth's atmosphere as the total reductions in pollutants in California between 2003 and 2019. So all of the reduction efforts, right? All of these reduction efforts were wiped out by one wildfire. Wildfire emissions in 2020 were 127 million metric tons of CO2, 7 times, right, the 2003 to 2019 mean. We are putting more into the atmosphere, which of course also affects our water cycle. Our oceans are much warmer than we previously thought. In fact, 60% more, according to a new study, right? A drop of pH of 0.1 may not seem like a lot, but the pH scale is logarithmic. if your blood pH dropped as much as the oceans, you really could easily die. As ocean acidification continues, the situation will only worsen, threatening marine life and ecosystems even more. So again, we've got to look at this. As the oceans continue to absorb more CO2, the pH decreases and the ocean becomes more acidic. Now, ocean acidity has increased 30% since the beginning of the industrial revolution. This rate of change surpasses all ocean chemistry changes in the past 50 million years. If we don't take significant action now, ocean acidification will lead to the collapse of marine ecosystems, threatening biodiversity, food security, and economies worldwide. Okay, fact. Since the beginning of the industrial era, the ocean has absorbed some 525 billion tons of CO2 from the atmosphere, right? It's actually helping us. We'd be warmer if the ocean wasn't absorbing it. It strengthens the projection that the oceans will not absorb as much of our future CO2 emissions and that the pace of future climate change will quicken, right? So this is it's not an unlimited capacity to absorb CO2. When the water heats up, it takes more space, and that means as the oceans warm, the sea levels rise. Researchers found that after pooling data taken over the past 50 years, the world's oceans are absorbing less carbon. Ice. So we've got to think about it. The Arctic sea ice extent has declined at a rate about 13% per decade since the 1970s, according to satellite observations, right? This is bad, right? Because our oceans are melting faster than predicted. Did I say oceans? I mean ice. Our ice is melting faster than predicted, right? So if we take a look at the sea ice vanishing, the darker ocean absorbs more sunlight. And that creates a feedback loop that accelerates global warming, right? So that's where the oceans and the sea ice come into play. And the oceans will absorb more heat from the sun, where the snow or the sea ice will reflect it. This rapid loss of sea ice signals a breach of Earth's tipping points, beyond which climate change could become irreversible. Right? If you look at the health system of a human being, like we're not aware of heart disease until it becomes a heart attack. Like there are tipping points that are disastrous, and they don't always come slow, right? Sometimes it comes in rapid ways because of the tipping point that's involved. So ice, right? The retreat of the glaciers and the ice sheets is losing the Earth's air conditioning, which is accelerating again global warming. The fact is, warmer temperatures have reduced the bright white ice in the Arctic, and the resulting loss in light reflectivity leads to heating and further ice melt. Again, this is a loop. These are systems, right? And so with the ice, right, here's the dangerous one. The date of when the Arctic permafrost will melt and release trapped methane gas is getting closer and closer and could trigger a dangerous increase in global warming, right? Trapped beneath the permafrost are billions of tons of methane, which is a powerful greenhouse gas. If the Arctic thaws, some 50 gigatons of methane could be abruptly released at any time, raising our temperature 2 degrees Celsius and costing us, this is the estimate, $60 trillion. That's an insane level of impact, right? So let's take a look at these again. If we look at the interlocking systems, the air system impacts the fire system, which also impacts the water and the ice system. And these are all nesting and accelerating. And as they accelerate, right, as they become faster in the nested interlocking nature of it, we're going to get more severe ecocide and we're going to get more severe societal impacts. Now, let's take a look at probably one of the most dangerous ecocide potential that's out there, which is phytoplankton. Estimates show that up to 80% of the oxygen you are breathing comes from the ocean. In order for you to continue to breathe, you have to have a healthy ocean. Most people think of it as just the trees. It's actually the phytoplankton. And these tiny ocean plants contribute 50 to 80% of the oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere, right? Now, here's the danger. Research on phytoplankton shows that at least a 33% reduction since 1950. This is scary. What happens if we get to a tipping point with the engine that's producing our oxygen? Shore ecocide, right? This is Capitola, and I've been to these little houses, and they're boarded up, right? They've got sandbags all around it. In 2019, a new climate report shows that the oceans are rising faster and the ice is melting more, and it's putting all of our coastal cities at risk, right? As the sea ascends, coastal communities will find themselves in an unforgiving embrace with the ocean's might. The rising sea is an unyielding adversary for coastal cities, promising a future where floods are the norm and respite is but a memory. I want for you to think about this. Society, global society, is built on the coasts and on rivers that lead into the oceans, because that's how trade was done. And what happens is we have a massive infrastructure that's all constructed along the shorelines of every country on the planet, right? The amount of people living near the ocean will create centuries of defense, retreat, and the reimagination of life along our coasts, right? Now we get into the soil ecocide, which is another risk factor, right? As we strip the earth of its fertile mantle, we're not just eroding the soil, but the very foundation of our sustenance and survival, right? If we lose the topsoil, it takes thousands of years to create topsoil, and there's just not that much of it, right? And degraded soil makes growing food more difficult. According to some scientists, Earth will run out of viable topsoil in 60 years. We're doing this to ourselves. We're putting chemicals into the topsoil, right? And it is hard. We've got to think about how we're farming and doing it in a way that's much more sustainable. The equator is going to become unlivable. Extreme heat increases the risk of other types of disasters. It impacts drought and it impacts wildfire, right? As the planet continues to warm, we get these multi-day heat waves, and they're coming in length and frequency and intensity. And where is this going to have the most impact, right? As it gets progressively worse, it's going to be at the equator, right? Because these small changes in average temperature produce big changes in the number and intensity of extreme temperature days. But it's going to be more extreme at the equator, right? By 2053, 107 million people are expected to be subjected to unlivable levels of extreme heat, according to the First Street Foundation. That's a lot of people, right? And they're at the equator. It's just not going to be livable. But here's the thing, is the air ecocide. Even right now, new data from the World Health Organization shows that 9 out of 10 people breathe air containing high levels of pollutants, right? Estimates reveal an alarming death toll of right now 7 million people every year caused by outdoor and indoor or household air pollution. Now we got to get into the animals. Nearly half of our species are in decline. Half are in decline. 1 out of every 4 mammals is at risk of extinction. 1 million animal and plant species are now threatened with extinction. Here's a scary thought. We dominate the earth as human. 96% of the animal mass on this planet are humans or human livestock. Wild animals only make up 4%. So we've conquered the world. Now we've got to take responsibility for what we're going to do to create this a more livable spaceship in the future. Lots have been talking about coral reefs because these were once vibrant undersea cities teeming with life. They now face the specter of becoming bleached boneyards, right? The projections are all reefs could be gone in 60 years. That's ecocide, folks. You know, I have dove in the Great Barrier Reef, right? That's not going to be something potentially my grandchildren will be able to do. Ocean ecocide. Global warming is suffocating large parts of the ocean, right? In fact, the last time the oceans got this acidic this fast, 96% of marine life went extinct. Fact is the greatest extinction event in the history of the planet. was driven by oceans acidifying slower than they are today. Ecocide: if the ocean dies, terrestrial life will die with it. Fact: 5 out of 5 of our past extinction events had elevated levels of CO2 and ocean acidification. We're playing around where we have to act. I don't know how else to say it. We've got to have this be the most important issue going forward. As the climate warms, stronger storms are making the wettest days wetter, heightening flood risk. Right? In recent years, a larger percentage of precipitation has come in the form of intense single-day events. 9 of the top 10 years for extreme one-day precipitation events have occurred since 1996. We are flooding more, right? Heavy rainfall is the new normal, and it brings more frequent and more devastating floods. And yes, it's impacting storms, right? Simulations project a 28% increase in Category 4 and 5 storms globally. 85% of all damages from hurricanes come from Category 4 and 5 storms. We used to get a Category 5 hurricane in the Atlantic once every 5.5 years. In the last 5 years, we're averaging 1 every 10 months. The hurricanes of the future will be the architects of devastation, sculpting our coastlines with winds that will write new maps of ruin. Food impact. As the climate pattern shifts, so does the map of global food production, with regions once lush with crops turning barren in the face of our changing atmosphere. Right? It can happen. Think of the Dust Bowl. Right? These events happen, and we're setting up the environment so that they're going to be happening more frequently. 95% of African farmers without irrigation rely increasingly on erratic rainfall. Previously facing droughts every 5 or 6 years, they now endure them every 2 or 3 years, significantly impacting agriculture and food security. It's going to impact your pocketbook. It already is mine. I mean, what I pay for fire insurance is off the charts, right? There's an economic impact that's already happening. Climate disasters caused about $350 billion in damage across the world in 2017, with insurers paying out a record at that time of $138 billion. Damages from 2022 disasters totaled $165 billion in the USA alone, right? How many multi-billion-dollar events do you think our economy or any economy can handle, right? Projections show how global warming could create a reduction of over 25% of the world's GNP and reach a cost of $800 trillion, right? That's why we've got to act now. This is economically in our best interests. Insurance experts rank climate change as the top risk for this and every year in the future. Right? This is how you know climate change is real. Like, insurance companies don't lose money, right? They know how to calculate risk, and this is their number one risk factor. And they're increasing rates or moving out of markets completely because they can't engineer a projection where they could actually make money and they could lose, right? And so in insurance and reinsurance, if you don't think that climate change is real, go talk to somebody that's an insurance rater and adjuster. Our planet is now in the midst of a mass extinction of plants and animals. And this is only the 6th wave of extinctions in the past 500 million years. We're already in the extinction event. So what can you do, right? And it's important that we actually start taking action. And it has to be a collective action. So it can feel overwhelming, I get it. And so part of this is we got to educate everyone, especially climate change deniers. It's your job, right? Vote. It's the only issue that matters. There's a lot of other things out there that are really relevant. I know people feel passionate about that and everything else. If we don't have a planet and we don't have a spaceship, the rest doesn't matter. And there is a risk factor. And so this has to move, right? No matter your political party, you actually have to move this to being the number one issue for your group of individuals, because it's the only issue that matters. And you want to demand a fee on carbon. So in the United States, there's still 150 members of the US Congress and Senate that are still climate change deniers. We just can't. whether they're doing it to please a constituent or trying to get donor money. I don't know the motivations. It's just that it's not a motivation that look, the politicians will change if you change. I want for you to be really clear about this. It's on us. We get the politicians we deserve. So it's up to us to make this the #1 issue. The United States has more climate change deniers by percentage of population than anywhere else in the world, right? We think about education, we think about what, I don't know why, right? But it's really important that we actually make a fundamental shift in how we're approaching this. And this is where we need to become educated about the risks of ecocide for our one shared ecosystem, our one spaceship. Everyone, actually, you talk to anybody that's age 15 and younger, they get it that we have to act now. There is such a thing as anxiety about the climate in our young. So 3 things you can do today. Don't be silent. It's your job to help others get their head out of the sand, right? If you know a climate change denier, send them a link to this video. Or you just know somebody that's on the fence. It's called get off the fence, right? Somebody's not taking action. Somebody's not doing something. We need to have a collective mindset where this is the #1 most important issue. If you make a mess, clean it up, right? This is the very first thing parents teach their kids, right? Just like you have to pay to have your garbage removed, right? You have a fee, which is you get your garbage removed every week. You need to start paying to have your carbon removed. And if everybody is paying, the economy scales, right? It'll lower the cost for all. But it's not, that is a shared ecosystem and it has a cost associated with it. And so if we're putting carbon into the atmosphere, we actually have to remove that carbon as a cost, right? On every aspect of it, whether it's food production, vehicle, transportation, whatever it is, we've got to remove the cost. We actually have to put the cost in, right? We have to remove the carbon. We have to put a fee so that it's actually fair. And everybody, if you use carbon, right? Right now we have subsidies for oil and gas. That's what we've got to shift, right? So call your representative and demand a fee on carbon. You just have to, right? The planet is not magically going to get better. We've already run out of time, right? We should have done this back in 1990. But to avoid ecocide, we have to act in this election cycle. We're just out of time, right? So if any one of your representatives says is a climate change denier, you have to vote them out this election cycle. We're out of time, right? It just, like, go make sure that they're this issue. By the way, if everybody makes this an issue, I guarantee you, all your other, like, if this is the one common thing that unites us, right? We always think about those science fiction movies where if only an alien was coming to plant the Earth, right, it would unite us around something where we would rally together to actually defeat the external alien. The problem is the alien in this situation that's putting us at risk is us, right? And so we have to rally. We have to come together. We can't solve this as 2 separate parties, right? It has to become the #1 issue in both parties. It has to become the #1 issue across the world. It has to become the #1 issue for dictators, right? If we're going to have representatives, and we do have we have a duty to actually inform our representatives that this is what we need, right? We need to get people that are going to take action on this because we're out of time. In 1943, we constructed a word to properly convey the most heinous act of human evil. So this is during the Nazi trials, and genocide was a word that was created for the killing or destroying of a race or a tribe of people, right? So we took the word homicide and we created genocide, and it didn't exist, right? Now, ecocide was first recorded in 1970, where Arthur Galston actually proposed a new international agreement to ban ecocide, right? So this is also a word that we have to, it isn't even the climate crisis or global warming or whatever else it is. No, we're looking at ecocide, and we have to have an association, and we actually need a bit of fear or whatever we need to motivate action around this. And if we do those three things, right? If we get everybody on board by having everybody tell everybody, and if we actually demand a fee on carbon, and we lead the world in doing that, right? And we actually vote, right? And we actually get our representatives to make this their number one issue, we have a shot at saving our planet. So the ecocide index is a way of viewing the interlocking ecological data of our planet. Ecocide is the destruction of large areas of the natural environment as a consequence of human activity, and global ecocide is the collapse of the interlocking systems that support life, including human life. Here's the bad news. And it just is. I don't know any other way to say it, and especially when we've done the ecocide index with projections, all the numbers are getting worse. They're not getting better. Every single trend line in this, which is the interlocking data that goes here, is getting worse. And the projections are that it's worse. And so we're out of time. So tell everybody you know this is not the time to be silent. Your voice matters. You can do more. If we raise our voices en masse, we can make a shift. And we actually have, of any country, we actually have the resources to make a shift. This is your planet. This is your living spaceship. We need your voice heard. We are well versed in the data of danger, yet a true sense of urgency remains dormant until the heart fully grasps the peril we face. Now, I just, the way that I get motivated to action is I think of the next generations. And I think that the humankind has actually left, in many ways, the world in a better place. And I don't think my generation's doing that. And so for me, it's imperative that we act so that the future generations have a better shot at creating the kind of a world where they can express their full selves in this environment. So get off the fence, join me in the journey of removing the threat of ecocide on this planet.